Hello and welcome to another Wednesday webinar. I'm Viola DeBose, founder of J-Skills Life After Journalism. This is the place where journalists come to learn how to market your skills and transfer them into a new and satisfying career. Today is a topic with a person that is close to my heart. So we are so lucky to have Dorie Turner Nolt here, who is an absolute just wonderful person. She really embodies the absolute nature of a journalist, having honed her chops at the AP. And then she shifted into what I call communications advocacy and really learning and leaning into her skills as a journalist and expanding them into making a difference. And she will talk more about that. And especially given what's happening right now, we've had a couple of tearful texts and conversations over the past few days. I think that there's no time that's more important than right now to talk about especially how the skills that journalists have can make a difference directly solving problems that absolutely need to be solved. So Dorie, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me.
You're welcome. I'd love to start by just having people really show who they are. And so talk to me about your personal background, where you grew up, how you grew up. And hi, Mom. Hi, Dorie, Mom.
Yeah, hi, Mom. My mom's on. All right, so I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee, born and raised, and went to the University of Tennessee, go Vols, and worked for a newspaper in Tennessee called the Chattanooga Times Free Press. For a few years out of J School or journalism school, for those who don't know what J School is. And then I moved to Atlanta and started working for the Associated Press and was there for 6 years. Then left journalism and started working for the Georgia Department of Education. I was an education journalist for AP, covered education nationally.
Why education? I mean, not education. Why journalism? How did you decide on that?
Sometimes I say that I stumbled into it, I lucked into it, and sometimes I say I did it on purpose. I can't decide which. I think probably both. I love talking to people. I love having conversations, and I love writing. And it seemed like the career where I was going to get to do that. Little did I know that you can also use those skills to do other types of communicating and writing that's not news. But at the time, it seemed to me, and this would have been in the 90s, the mid 90s, it seemed to me that journalism was the best way for me to use the skills, the things that I loved doing. I started working at the student paper at the University of Tennessee, and I just loved it. It felt like home. And so I actually declared my major my freshman year and never changed it.
Wow. I'd love to have folks give an example of the most unglamorous / the most journalistic experience you've ever had, in the profession. So what would you say that is?
Oh, there are so many. The most unglamorous. Well, I'll give you like a smattering. I've written stories from the side of a highway in the middle of Georgia from my car. I have called in quotes while driving back to the bureau. Mom, don't listen. That was a long time ago. I once had to cover a wreck and was in really inappropriate shoes. This was the last time I didn't have sneakers in my car. Was in highly inappropriate, like wedge shoes, running up the shoulder of a highway, and then almost got run over by a giant vehicle. It was bad. Let's see. I've been at murder scenes. I got chased off. If you guys remember, have I blanked on his name? The guy who falsely claimed that he killed JonBenet Ramsey. He didn't, but he says he did. Anyway, his dad's house, when I was at AP in Atlanta, we had to go to his dad's house to try and get a quote, and we got chased off by a gun. Mom, don't listen. I didn't tell her these things. Right?
My mom came on to get all the
I'm
tea.
not a reporter anymore, Mom. No, I
Get
mean,
all the
like,
tea that you don't say when you
yeah,
call.
yeah.
Yeah.
Sitting in the back of like a dinky campaign room for a city council person, trying not to eat the food, having not eaten all day, being just starving,
Yeah.
drinking water, middle of the night. I covered a tornado. That was horrible.
The point is you did it, right? You really did
Yeah,
it.
I've
You
done
did
it.
it. No question. You were in there.
Yeah.
And then you decided not to do it. Tell us about that transition.
Yeah, it was really a difficult decision to make because I really identified so strongly as a reporter and I thought that was basically my only identity, not realizing that it actually wasn't. And that I would find new identities. I was pretty miserable at work. I liked what I was writing about. I didn't like how I was getting to write about it. I felt like there were people who were offering solutions to inequities and injustice in education, and I didn't feel like I was really getting to be part of offering or helping with those solutions, helping implement them, helping test them out, offering solutions that I found that I thought would be helpful. And so I sat down with my husband at a pizza joint one day and said, I am miserable. What do I do? I've never been anything but this. How do I do this? And we sat down and we went through all the skills the way your course talks about. We went through all of our skills, my skills, all the things that we thought would translate, things that I liked doing, things that really spoke to me. And then I just put it out there. I told people I trusted.
Did you think you could have done that by yourself, figure it out?
No. That was one of the things this morning I was thinking about when I was thinking about like things that were critical to me was having, it was my husband, but if you have a friend or a partner, I also had trusted friends I was bouncing ideas off of. But having people you trust who you can say like, when you look at me, what do you see? What skills do you see me having? What do you think I could use in a different kind of work? And I was like, this was a very different time in journalism. So I left journalism in 2011 or 12, I can't remember. And that was a long time ago in journalist years. Things are very different now. I don't regret it. People have always asked me that. Do you regret it? Do you miss it? I miss parts of it. I don't miss the job. I like the hours I keep now. I like getting to use my opinion and say it out loud. I like, getting to go canvas for political candidates I believe in. I like that stuff. It's not for everybody.
And I know some journalists hearing that think that that's absolutely crazy because they can't even imagine doing that right now, sitting in the seat, in the chair, in the identity that they're in.
Right.
And that was you. So we are going to take everyone through your evolution because it wasn't overnight. It wasn't like today I'm filing a deadline, tomorrow I'm holding up signs.
Right. No, it was a slow evolution. It took me time. And I also, having been in a newsroom and then a week later working for the Georgia Department of Education, I knew that because I was one of the public faces of the department, that what I could put out on social media could be quoted. And so I still was careful. I'm a lot more outspoken now that I work for myself.
Yeah.
But I will say, like, it was an evolution. I think one of the questions we got in advance from Lindsay, if you're there, hi, Lindsay. Also a former reporter who I worked with in Chattanooga, and she now does communications and corporate comms. She's amazing, and corporate coaching. So, it was a slow process. I will say even now today, I edit and re-edit and copy edit and constantly edit everything I'm putting on social media. It's hard to get that sort of self-editing out of you. Once a journalist, always a journalist.
Oh gosh, yes, yes.
Yeah, when there's a typo, I'm like, delete. I don't care how many people have already liked it. I'm redoing it.
Twitter is so bad for that
Yeah.
because I have done tweets with mistakes and I'm like, you can't redo because then you lose the engagement. So you just suck it up and have people make fun of you, or only journalists make fun of you. Who knows? But tell us how you got the job at the Department of Education. You're at the at the AP, you are reflecting, thinking about your own skills, workshopping with your husband, and then you're at Georgia Ed. But how?
So I put it out there to a few trusted folks of places that I thought, okay, this is a place I would like to work. I knew I wanted to work in government or nonprofits. I did not want to go into a for-profit comms agency. That wasn't my something that really spoke to me, and I would learn later on that it still wasn't, because I tried that, it didn't work. So I let a few places know, a few trusted sources know that I was interested in possibly leaving the newsroom. And I remember I went to lunch with Matt Cardoza, who ended up being my boss at the Georgia Department of Ed, and he was a good friend of mine. And I said, you know, I'm thinking about leaving journalism, and I'm not quite sure what to do. Do you have any jobs? I know it's just he was by himself, the only comms person in the entire state agency. And his eyes got huge. And he said, "Are you joking?" And I said, "No, I'm not joking." And a week later, he had created a job for me. Wow. It was just, and I was like, oh, people actually want me and want to work with me. Okay. That was news to me. I was like, oh, people want to work with me. This is great. And I actually, once I announced that I was leaving, I had quite a few people say, oh, if you had told me, I would have hired you.
What?
And I was like, okay. This is kind of like when you graduate high school and all those guys say, I totally would have asked you out in high school if I, had been more, more adventurous or more like self-confident. And like, come on.
And you're like, what?
Yeah, come on, guys. So yeah, I was shocked. I couldn't believe people wanted to work with me. Being a journalist, you don't always make friends. You're not there to make friends. And I was, oh God, what if I've been so objective that people can't see me for who I am? But it actually, it was a little bit of whiplash, I will say. You and I talked about this. Right. I went from reporting on a state agency to then working in that state agency. And of course, once I was interviewing for the job, I took a break from reporting on them.
Yeah.
That's just good standard procedure. And somebody else took over my beat, and I was just doing general breaking news. And I got the job, and a week after, leaving the newsroom, I'm in meetings where I'm learning all of this stuff, thinking, I wish I had known this when I was a reporter. They're just telling me everything.
Yes. Yeah.
They're telling me how they really feel about the governor. This is crazy.
I know. And when you have spent so much time, I liken it to knocking on the door. I know we have talked about this. In DC, I was an education reporter. My first move was into education, working for the agency that I covered. And I felt like at that agency and at so many others, I had just been knocking on the door, trying to be let in, like, tell me information. And they would just peek it, blah, 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 and then close back the door. And then it becomes, here's a door, it's open, come in, sit down. What do you want to eat? Are you hungry? Let me get your coat. It's like mind blowing.
And our dirty laundry.
Yeah. And to me, I felt like this guest, and I was like, I want to stay here because now I know everything. But with knowing comes responsibility, right? And this is what is really critical, as everyone listening is thinking about going from journalism where you're neutral to really joining a side, to really use the lingo that we typically do in media, joining a side. So then you're not neutral, you work for an agency, you work for an organization. Yep. And you are responsible. So tell us about, in that first role, how you came to understand what it meant to be responsible.
There was a voice in my head going, what can we leak? Can we leak this? But then there was another, it's like a little journalist over here wanting the scuttle and wanting to leak things. And then the communicator over here going, what are you doing? This is your boss, So part of me was excited about having stuff to leak, but then I very quickly learned that if I was doing my job well as a communicator, I wasn't having to leak anything, because I was being as open, especially working in government, both in the state government and then in the federal government, being as open as possible with everything, trying to get journalists as much information as possible. And I learned if I was doing my job well, that urge to leak went away, because there was no need for it. So, and, also, I was surprised how many of my skills as a journalist translated into what I was doing. I was doing interviews, I was writing still, I was trying to write all of the press releases like a news story, the way that anybody will tell you a press release should be written, like a news story, although a lot of them aren't. I was doing social media for the department, and the department had mostly just done Twitter and a little Facebook, and I got them on Instagram and Pinterest. There was no Snapchat and TikTok at the time. And LinkedIn wasn't really a thing yet. So I was trying to get really fun content and do as much storytelling about all the districts in Georgia as much as possible, and what the superintendent was doing. I was playing photographer, which is something, if you have worked in journalism in the last 20 years, you've probably had to be your own photographer. And so I was taking those skills, taking video and photo with just my phone. They got me like a random camera they found in like a closet, and it was like janky and old, but I used it. It was like an old Canon. And, having to really produce a lot of content the way I was having to do at AP just the month before, but just in a different way.
And so I know that there are several pieces to the job, and absolutely producing that content, using those skills, is a large part of it. And that part of the job feels natural. It feels like you are good at that. It feels familiar. Tell us about the parts of the job that were new and that you had to learn. I've heard lots of questions from people in previous webinars just about office etiquette and about building relationships. So tell us about those pieces of the job, and why they're not fluff, why they're actually really, really essential to doing the work.
I didn't know how to do PowerPoint when I left the newsroom. You don't need to do PowerPoint as a journalist for the most part. And I had to do a PowerPoint for the superintendent, the state school superintendent, my first week. And I was like, okay. And so I just learned PowerPoint because I had to. And I'm still not great at it, but I can do it. It's serviceable now. I cussed in like the first week. I cussed in a meeting, because as a journalist, for the most part, there's a lot of cussing where you work and in meetings. And I cussed in a meeting, and everybody looked at me like I had 3 heads. And I was like, oh, we don't cuss in meetings here. Okay. Now, luckily, once I got into the Obama administration, there was a little more cussing in meetings. A little more. Let's see, what else? Just, in journalism, you are encouraged to ask a lot of questions, to not worry about how those questions are phrased, to push people, to ask the same question over and over again, to get sources to really open up to you. And if that's how you're approaching meetings with your colleagues, they're not going to like having you in their meetings for very long. So I had to learn how to hold my face so that I wasn't reacting to things very visibly. Like the thoughts going through my head did not need to come out in my expressions. I had to learn how to not be so terse in emails, to be more gentle and kind, and how to phrase things. And that's something I still work on. And it's been, almost a decade since I left the newsroom, but which is crazy to think about. But anyway, yeah. So, I had to learn how to work on a team. Journalists work on teams, but only sort of, kind of. There's still a lot of about teammates, and you're still an island as a journalist. It's what you can get, what you can offer, what you can provide to the news organization. And when you're on a team at a state agency or federal agency, It's not about you. And it's not about what you can get. It's about what you can add to the whole. And learning how to be a good teammate. Also, journalism is very white, and I was going from a very white place to a very diverse place. And Georgia Department of Ed was diverse when you got down into the ranks. It wasn't super diverse at the top. And then the Obama administration was incredibly diverse from the top down, in all areas. And so learning how to work with people from other backgrounds, of other races, that's all been a learning curve for me. Learning how not to tell inappropriate jokes in meetings. I mean, gallows humor is a real thing in a newsroom, right? Everybody makes really inappropriate jokes, and
Oh my
that
God.
does not go over well in a meeting.
I mean, you joke about death, you joke about,
Constantly.
I mean, I won't say famous, but I think somewhere on Pointer, there's a memo of a Miami Herald editor to his team about a hurricane. And there's a section that's like, don't die because then we won't get your like feed, like literally it's like, don't forget to not die so that we don't lose the color in your notebook. And
See, the journalist in me think that's hilarious.
to me, that's so funny. And in the real world, it's like, are you insane?
Yeah.
You know? And I love what you said about working on a team, because journalism, it is a team, right? Like I did not write. Now, some people work at smaller papers, right? Or different sizes and different kinds of publications and platforms. But I did not write my story, edit it myself, copy edit. I didn't do all of that. I did it, and then the rest of the team took over. But I didn't have to, working with them was more of an exception than the rule. And I worked the most closely with photographers, I would say even more than editors, because the editor, you would interact. It was like interact and then go back to doing your thing. Like, here I am, interact, come back, and you come into an office setting where it's like you and like all these people around you all the time. I had to just get used to people just always being there all the time. That was a very difficult thing for me, because I realized, I knew that I was an introvert, but when you have a job where you talk to people all day and then you write stories, it doesn't really come up because it's all this one-on-one conversation. Yeah. So you think that you're being social and talking to people, and by the end of the day, I'd be tired because I'm talking to all these people. But then you go to an office setting where it's you and your team, and you have a meeting and it's 12 people, and you're like, oh my God, I'm so tired. Like, there's all these people around all the time, and I have to check with 12 people to get anything done. Yep. Now, journalists think that that's, because I thought this coming in, that it's like, it's slow, it takes too long, it's not efficient, it's dumb. And I had to catch myself, because maybe it is inefficient, but efficiency is not the goal for everything, right?
Yeah. And it's interesting. I'm 1,000,000% an extrovert, which anybody who knows me on here knows that. And I was tired after long days in communicating. I was tired and physically after being a long day of reporting on something really terrible, but I was consistently exhausted after my days at the Georgia Department of Ed and the Education Department, because it is a completely different way of engaging, right? I had two audiences. I had the people I worked with, the people on my team, the people who I reported to, and then I had journalists. Those were my two audiences, and then I was doing some comms outreach to school districts too. So there was also that audience. And as a journalist before, I just had one audience, which was the world. So I was having to constantly think about these different audiences and how I was presenting things. And you're right, like the efficiency, as a journalist, I thought that PIOs, public information officers, and comms people just sat there waiting for me to call and had nothing else to do with their days. And that is just not the case. So I very quickly had had an appreciation for all of that impatience that I'd had as a journalist. Now, I did try to bring a little bit of that journalism approach to what I was doing, and to push folks to move a little faster, to help folks understand what journalists need, how they need it, what's helpful to them, what's not. I try to, I still, in what I do, I try to think like a journalist. Like, is this helpful to a journalist? If it's not, how can I make it helpful? But people who haven't been in that job don't understand. They're like, that reporter's just being annoying. And I'm like, no, that reporter's doing their job. So how do we help them do their job? And I felt like I was an ambassador to my coworkers on behalf of journalists.
And let's be real, some are annoying. I learned that. People used to always tell me when I was a reporter, oh, you're such a good reporter. I didn't listen to that. I didn't take any stock into it. Nope. I just thought, are my stories accurate? Thank you, goodbye. I didn't even care that people said that. And the minute that I became the person who had to respond to reporters and deal with them, I said, no, I was a really good reporter, because I would say to people, I will get back to you, and then I would get back to them. I wouldn't say, I'll get back to you, and then not call back, and then publish a story that says you didn't do something. And it's like, no, you said you would give me time to get back to you. Well, I wrote my story. I realized that there is etiquette that reporters absolutely should have and could have. And frankly, if you are right now a reporter and you feel like you fall more along those lines and you want to make a transition, it will be more difficult for you to do so, because there's a way to do your job and not be an asshole. And yep. that's everybody's job everywhere. I would often liken, because you would meet people who didn't want to talk to you sometimes, but then they had to. And so I would just think of myself as a dentist sometimes with those people, because no one likes going to the dentist, right? Yeah. No one likes it. And sometimes you gotta go. And some people, because of their role, right, they had to talk to me, Washington Post reporter. And I was like, look, I'm sorry, just think of me as the dentist. It might be a little painful, but it's gotta happen. Yeah. But I don't have to be an asshole and go in there with the drill and like kill them, so I want people to really understand how it's not biased or you're losing your objectivity to just be a person who is true to their word and treats the other person as a person. I mean, that's what we're all dealing with now, problems in the world, because we don't treat people as human beings, actually. Yeah. So,
and I think, yeah. We've all, if those of you who work in a newsroom, have worked in a newsroom, you've sat next to that reporter who is a total asshole. You have sat next to that person, you've listened to that person have conversations, and you have felt sorry for the other person on the end of that phone.
Yes.
And then all of a sudden I was that person on the other end of the phone. With that very person, with that very asshole.
Yep.
And I was having to deal with them. And, I got yelled at. I have never been yelled at more than when I was the press secretary at the U.S. Department of Education. I got yelled at so much by reporters. Reporters in DC are shouty. They shout.
I have heard several of my colleagues shout. I do want to demystify something for a second, because first of all, there are different kinds of communications, like you were saying. Yep. And I knew in my heart of hearts that I absolutely, positively could never be a press secretary. People say, no, you could do it. And I could say, okay, yeah, maybe I could do it, but I don't want to do it, because even the times when I had to speak on the record, it was just so traumatizing for me. It was like I could hear myself trying to analyze the words that I knew that they were writing down. And I was like, is this a good quote? Is this right? But I need to give a quote that's not too good. Otherwise, my boss will be mad at me. Like all these crazy things. And there are some people like my husband, like you, they're just like, what do you need? What do you got? Let's just chat. And I love that.
It's an amazing... It is jarring.
What?
Like, okay.
It's so weird. It's weird. And it's happened to me a couple of times personally for the work that I do. It happened to me, when I worked at organizations. I got a little more used to it. I'm very proud of a quote I gave to the New York Times that actually got in as is. And it was like on message and perfect. And I was like, I finally figured this out after 5 years. But explain to us, what does it mean to be the press secretary for the U.S. Department of Education, I guess director, head? I'm blanking on the title now.
It was just press secretary, and then I was a
Yeah.
senior advisor to or senior communications advisor to the secretary.
Secretary, that was it. I'm sorry. So yeah.
Yeah, he was the secretary. So I worked for Arne Duncan and then John King under the Obama administration. And something I remembered this morning that I thought was really important. I would not have gotten the job at the U.S. Department of Education. I was told this by my boss, Massey Rich, who's also a former journalist, and who
Yes.
you guys went to school together.
Yeah.
I would not have gotten that job if I had not had my experience at the Georgia Department of Education. They would not have hired me straight out of the AP newsroom.
Yeah.
And so when I left AP, I was not vying to be this press secretary at the U.S. Department of Education. It fell in my lap from a friend of mine, but it was important to me to know that I had taken a leap. Like I basically followed my heart. My heart said, I don't want to do this anymore. So I took a leap. I did a thing, and then an opportunity fell in my lap, and I went, oh, I want to do this now. Mm-hmm. And so, if you look at my resume, it looks like I planned it from the very beginning, but I didn't. I didn't plan any of it.
And
but
I just want to say, because all of the guests that we have had so far, and even when I have told my own story, there has been a point where something has just fallen into my lap and everyone's lap. And I know if you're sitting there and you're like, I've applied to a gazillion places, or I don't know where to start, that sounds really annoying. It sounds like we're lucky. It just sounds like, oh, maybe that'll never happen to me. And I would love for you to talk about like how you actually become someone where the opportunities do fall in your lap and you can attract things to you. Because like you said, it didn't happen straight from the newsroom.
Yeah, I think there's a lot there, right? Some of that is knowing which of your sources who are also your friends, and you can go to and say, look, this is sort of where I'm at. Do you have any advice? Do you know of any roles that would be a good fit for me? Some of that is who I am as a person. We talked about this a minute ago. I try to be a kind person, a good colleague, a good coworker, who people enjoy working with. And that helped a lot because people wanted to work with me. Which was a shock to me. I was like, oh, okay, people actually, they like me. I think also, look at what you're applying to. Are you just throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks? Or are you being intentional and thoughtful about what you want to do? Because, having been somebody who's looked through 1 million resumes to hire assistant and deputy press secretaries, I can tell you can tell the people who are just like, what else? Just throwing, seeing if it works, versus the people who really want that job. I also think that what I do now in consulting, organizations need people who have good brains, who can think critically and offer value to that organization, whether that's writing, editing, graphic design, photography, video, social media, digital. I'm not good at digital. Like I can do social media, I can tweet, I can Instagram, but I'm not a digital person, and I know that. I don't know how to graphic design. I know how to go on Canva and use their graphics, but that's it. So know your strengths and try and apply or try and stick to those. Follow what you're interested in. If you're not interested in something, that's going to come through. You're going to go to an interview and it's going to be perfectly obvious that you're not interested. So like, what really speaks to you? Education spoke to me. My mom is on here. She is a lifetime educator. Her mom was an educator, my aunts. I come from a long line of educators, and I knew I didn't want to be an educator, but I thought, I can add to education in journalism. And then I thought, oh, I can add to education in policy communications. And so following sort of where your gut is taking you is really critical.
And I know that there are a mix of people on here, and some have already left journalism and some are still in it. But just know that there is a reputation that you have.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not because of that story you wrote one time about this. It's a reputation about you as a person.
Yep.
And I didn't understand that until I left the newsroom. And a lot of people were happy that I was working for them because oh, we read your story, or they were happy to have someone with the insight that I had now bring the insight to them. Some people weren't happy about it. And that's something to also keep an eye on, because some people may have had trauma with media or reporters and then they don't like it. But I was surprised. I recently messaged someone who I didn't know personally, but she had just gotten a new job coming back into DC in education. And I said, hey, welcome, congratulations. I said who I was because I didn't really know her, but I knew of her. And she wrote back, she accepted the LinkedIn request and said, thank you. And she said, I remember you when you were at the Post. And I was like, wow, because I thought I didn't even know this woman. Like, I've never quoted her or anything, but she knew me, and she knew me maybe through my work, but likely through other people who I talked to. Maybe I quoted her colleague all the time and they said things about me that were probably okay because she accepted my LinkedIn request, right? Um, and so to your point about people who going to people who can help you, if you have or had good relationships with people, it's about going back to them and saying, hey, I'm thinking about this, or hey, what did you see? Reconnecting, especially now in this time, because like you said, there are people who do actually want to work with you, but they can't read your mind, right? You have to tell them. And their best friend could work at Google, or they could work at the NGO that you want to work at, and you have no idea.
Work that network, especially if you're based in DC. DC is a network town. Work that network.
Yep.
And I mean, it's true. People could think you're perfectly blissfully happy at what you're doing. And if you are not, that may not read because you're a professional and you know how to put that face on and, put that hat on and do what you're doing. But, let people know. And I think also, and you kind of spoke to this a little bit, and I said it a little bit, what's the piece of communications you want to do? If you want to do communications, I have friends who left the newsroom who went to law school. I have a friend who he was a journalist for a long time. He left the newsroom. He went to law school, and now he is a lawyer, a First Amendment lawyer, defending newspapers in lawsuits. I have another friend who just left journalism entirely, went to grad school, and is now an urban planner.
Mm-hmm.
I have friends who've left journalism and gone to be teachers.
Yep.
Any number of things. You don't have to be a communicator. It is a natural transition to be a communicator, but that you don't have to do that. It's what I like doing. But I also had to really play to my strengths. I can write an op-ed in 30 minutes. I know that. I can edit something in 10 minutes. I know that. I can write a statement in 10 minutes. I know that. But, the video I'm going to shoot for you is going to be very mediocre in some part. So I just know what my strengths are.
Let's talk about writing for a second, because there can be a thought, I know how to write, I go into this job, I'm a writer, no problem. The writing is different because it's your writing skill combined with other people's opinions and thoughts all around you, and a different process. So do you have an example of how your writing skills help, but that you still have to do it differently after the newsroom?
Oh man, writing letters from the state superintendent of education to teachers and students who've gotten scholarships or gotten awards, writing congratulatory letters. I am terrible at those. I am a news writer. I don't write fluffy. And I would hours, I would slay, just work really hard at these letters. And I got better at them, or writing congratulatory proclamations from the superintendent.
Whereas, right?
Anything that is perceived as being flowing and flowery and fluffy, that's not my thing. But I got better at it. I practiced. Writing memos, I am not good at memos. I've worked at it. And when you work for an agency, a federal agency, you have to write a lot of memos. I wrote thousands of memos, briefing memos, tough Q&A. I mean, you name it, you did it too. And I had no idea all of that went into being a press secretary, but sure enough, it did.
Yeah.
Uh, and so I think, not every kind of writing is the same, but that's okay. If you know how to write well and you know how to learn quickly, you'll figure it out. Also, knowing what your strengths are and playing to those, I think is key.
I still have, I think it is. And I love that. I even forgot about all the different kinds of writing. Um,
Yeah.
I could do many of those. I struggled with writing quotes for other people so
Learning
awful.
other people's voices really is a skill.
It's hard. It's hard. I have a friend who went to Berkeley J School with me, and he ended up being a speechwriter for a while. And I just thought, I'm just amazed at you doing that, because how do you write speeches for other people and make them sound like them? And I think it's absolutely a skill. And if that's something that you're interested in, look into that kind of writing because it's needed. Um,
Very well, very well needed.
I want to ask you about, how would you characterize your growth into advocacy? And I would just say, how did you find your voice? Because that's something that didn't come natural and took time. So how would you describe the process of finding your voice? And what I mean by that is knowing your opinion, sharing your opinion in a meeting, having your opinion shape a decision. How did you find your voice with that?
Uh, I mean, that is something it's a muscle. You have to practice and exercise it. And so it was a matter of me exercising and practicing that muscle and not just being a passive listener or observer in a meeting, but actually actively participating. It turns out I love talking in meetings, which I didn't know when I was a reporter, but
How would you know?
talking in meetings is really fun, and trying to help push people and
In a way that's not annoying or
right.
rude, right?
Yes. Yeah. And when you work in a presidential administration, there are a lot of, I mean, I can't speak for the current folks, obviously, but we were working on a lot of different policies all at the same time. And so I was needing to dig in and learn about those policies and then form my own opinions and push for what I thought was critical. And sometimes I didn't win, but sometimes people listened to me. I mean, the secretary listened to me, and that meant a lot to me. But part of that was like what I learned how to do as a reporter, which is reading everything I could read on something and learning as much as I could learn, and then forming an opinion based on what I knew.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a process. You're not gonna be good at that at the beginning, and that's okay. The thing you're gonna be good at the beginning is telling your boss, like when you go into communications, you're going to be good at telling your boss how a reporter is going to approach them, how a reporter is going to write about what you're doing. And that was certainly my job as press secretary, was to think about how reporters were going to cover the thing that we were doing. But also I felt like it felt critical to me to also be part of the people trying, and we talked about this at the beginning. I wanted to be part of the team solving the problems.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm going to be part of the team solving the problems, I need to add something to it.
Yes.
And so I felt like that was something I needed to do for me. And I also think that it takes time. People may not trust you coming in at the beginning, and that's okay. Don't take that personally. Most new employees at new places aren't trusted, not just former journalists.
Whoa, are you going to write something about this
Yeah,
meeting? Oh my
yeah.
God.
But
Worst.
at the same time, like you'll build that trust. Um, you will be more of a value to an organization using your journalism skills than you think you will. You really will. But also, learning how to win people over, which is something journalists need to know how to do, and not all of them know how to do it.
I certainly didn't. I certainly did.
Yeah.
And it's different to win them over quickly for a quote or for deadline. It's just very transactional.
Yep.
Versus winning them over time, because you're going to see them tomorrow and the next day and the next day and the next day. That's building relationships, which I sucked at for a really long time after the newsroom. Like,
It's
I was
hard.
the worst. I was so bad. I made tons of mistakes there, and I always emphasize that, because it's like, don't do what I do. But something that I've thought about that I want to make sure that people get from what you're saying, because it's so rich, is policy. Because over time, when I figured out that I had to go from neutral to doing the work and being responsible for the work, having an opinion, when someone said something bad about my agency, it was my job to respond and not be like, oh, whatever, it's just comments. No, is understanding the lever that you have, right? Journalists, the lever is publishing, it's information. We
Yep.
get information and we publish it. That's the lever. When it comes to legislative bodies, the lever is drafting and passing laws, right? And so if there's a problem, then we are going to draft and pass a law to fix the problem, right? Journalists, there's a problem, we're going to write a story about it to figure out and fix the problem.
Yep.
When you're in government, it's about what policy can we enact to fix this problem? And the policies, you're not the city council, you're not Congress, you're a government agency. And so you do policies either through executive orders or through how you run your program. And the policies shape how you want to be an agency, how you want to affect change in the world. For example, I think we see this now where I won't use Ed because it might be too painful, but when I was at the National Endowment for the Humanities, a friend of mine ran a department, and she said, the way that we prepare PhDs to do their work and then go out into the world and get a job is totally broken, because they spend all these years studying and then they go get jobs that aren't there and they're broke and all this stuff, right? So she was like, I think this has to change. And so she basically, there at NEH, like a bank, we just give out grants. So she said, we are going to create a grant program and we are going to give money to colleges and universities that have innovative and different PhD programs, right? And that's how she was affecting change. And so she was saying, as a policy, essentially, we are now doing this. And then after we left the Obama administration, that policy changed because they don't do that anymore, right? Yeah. And so you have to think about, when you think about going into different professions, different industries, what is the lever? What do they do to actually get the result that they're working for?
And then nonprofits lever is being a gadfly, right? Pestering, pushing government, pushing legislatures to move, right? That's the nonprofit role. And I mostly work with nonprofits now. So I do a lot of yelling at Betsy DeVos.
Hey, I wasn't going to say her name, but I'll let you say it. There you go, right?
And then, the philanthropic role is giving money to push policies. And I would say it's policy and process.
Yeah.
Because you can change processes that basically change policies.
Yes.
For example, the Office for Civil Rights at the U.S. Department of Education under the Obama administration changed how it looked at sexual violence and sexual assault and sexual harassment at both the K-12 level and the higher ed level. And I was very proud of that work we did. That has all been undone by the current secretary. I won't say her name again. And even to the point where, so when we were in office, we would get a complaint. Two ways that civil rights cases can start. You can do a complaint-based one, or you can open a compliance review based on, like, if you see a bunch of news stories, for example, out of the girls' gymnast team and the doctor. Why am I blanking on what college that is?
I'm blanking too. Someone can.
Everybody. It's too much.
Put it in the chat for us.
Too much going on in the world to hold all of the bad stuff. So anyway, that's an example. A lot of news reports on that then led to a compliance review. So, or like Penn State, right? And the football program there.
Yes.
So we would get a complaint, and then we would use that as an opportunity to look into systemic issues of how the college was handling sexual violence complaints and sexual assault and sexual harassment. The current administration immediately said, when we get a complaint, we will only look into that complaint. We will not look into systemic issues. And so our investigations were taking longer because we were actually trying to change the system that was making these complaints come forward versus just addressing the complaint itself. That's a procedure, but that is a completely different way of addressing transgressions and injustice.
Right. Which then becomes a policy. We
Exactly.
stand for this.
Exactly.
And so if you're curious, like, what is it like to work and do this stuff? This is what the this is what the block and tackle is like. This is what people talk about. This is how they affect change. And the result is different than a published story or a front page this. It's that we were able to look at something, and a journalist's ability to understand process becomes so valuable here.
So valuable.
I didn't understand that I had policy skills until we would dig into these issues, and I'd say, well, don't you think, and it's like I could hear where things were missing or where the kink was in the process or why things didn't work. And that is so valuable to actually being part of a team and then saying, why don't we look at this? Why don't we affect this change?
Yep.
I'm looking at the time, and folks have not put any questions in the chat, but I wanted to pause and give folks a chance to ask questions either in the chat or if they want to speak, because we've been talking a lot, but I want to make sure that we leave people at least a couple minutes to ask questions if they would like. So is there anyone who wants to ask a question either in the chat or?
Mom, don't ask any questions. You can ask me questions later on FaceTime.
I'll give it about 10 more seconds, anything.
This just means we were incredibly comprehensive and we have left nothing, no stone unturned, Viola. That's what this means.
It is a little strange for me knowing that I'm talking with journalists and that no journalist has a question. It's like, I'm like, I know we know how to ask questions, but I want to make sure that I absolutely capture the wisdom that you have about being an advocate. And I know now you work for yourself and you use all of this experience to essentially advocate for issues and organizations through communication. So explain what that means.
So I have a handful of clients, mostly, honestly, former Obama, organizations led by former Obama appointees in education that I work for, although some are people I met through just my work in the Obama administration, but they maybe didn't serve in it. So again, that network is critical. But I work for a handful of education nonprofits, mostly national, and I work for one national philanthropy. And you know, I help them with anything you can think of, right? Social media. I help them with op-ed writing. I do a lot of messaging drafting. I do a lot of Q&As. I do a lot of media pitching. You know, one of the things I've loved during this pandemic is actually through one of my clients, I got to learn what a lot of schools were doing to be innovative and keep students engaged in distance learning. And then I got to pitch that to reporters, and that was really fun because I was talking to students and teachers all day. It was awesome. You know, a little bright spot amid the very vast gloom of this pandemic. And then I also, because I now am not working 25 hours a day, which is what I was doing as the press secretary at the education department, I have time to choose the organizations I want to volunteer for. So I do communications pro bono for a local nonprofit that provides after school activities for underserved students, underserved youth in DC. And right now they're also leading the mutual aid outreach, making sure folks have food and cleaning supplies and sanitary supplies for their lives during the pandemic. I also am a volunteer chapter leader for Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America, the DC chapter. And being the DC chapter, we do a ton of stuff, but I do a lot of communications for them, but I've tried to use that as the chance to push myself on my skills. And so I've actually been doing more policy and organizing, which is something I had not really done before. The organizing piece. So my role on the chapter is one of the student liaisons. So I work with a lot of high school students and help them organize and protest and advocate and speak at city council hearings and things like that. And those two volunteer roles have been incredibly moving and powerful to me. I've learned so much. And so, yeah, it's been lovely actually having the time to pick a few things that I really wanted to dig in on. Ian has a question.
Does.
Hi, Ian.
Do you want to read it, Dorie?
Yeah, you mentioned transferable skills. Anything you recommend brushing up on for something similar to your press secretary experience? Let's see. So I would recommend brushing up on writing as quickly as possible. And I don't know where you work or have worked, but at AP, luckily, I learned how to write really quickly. And so when you are a press secretary, you have to move, 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 move. Oh, former AP. Hi, I thought your name was familiar.
There you go.
Okay. So great. I mean, you're already going to be ahead of the game because you know how to move quickly and write things quickly, either press releases, statements, statements responding to any number of things going on. Everybody has a statement about George Floyd right now. I've written 3 for clients, learning how I would brush up on like learning people's voices. I don't even know how you go about doing that, but like reading speeches, right? Like speeches for George W. Bush versus Obama. I wouldn't count the current guy because his speeches are not speeches, just ramblings of a crazy man. So you can compare presidential speeches, you can compare gubernatorial speeches and how their voices sound different. You can compare Arnie Duncan to John King. They had different voices. And their speechwriters had to learn those voices. What else?
I was listening to Justin Trudeau's 20-second pause and answer, and then I heard Gavin Newsom speak, and I was surprised that Gavin Newsom was that kind of speaker. So I would echo your advice about listening to people speak and listening how they speak and what they say.
And then I think the other thing is learning how to juggle a lot of balls in the air. So as press secretary at the US Department, my team was getting in several hundred requests each week. And I did have a team who could help, but ultimately I needed to look at and approve responses. Or I needed to do the responding myself. And so learning how to just keep a lot of balls in the air all at the same time. And those can be very simple requests to really complex requests. While at the same time, I was trying to plan for things we were going to announce. So I was doing the proactive stuff as well as the responsive. And so just, as much as you can, learning how to juggle that. And I think I was not super popular with our policy people in terms of my writing because I was writing like an AP reporter. But knowing how valuable that is and having to push people, like you don't capitalize the word state. The word state is not a capitalized word. Policy people capitalize that word, federal policy people. I don't know why, but they do. So I had to learn how, and I had to give in and like learning where to give in, right? Because as a journalist, you like dig in and you do not give any ground, and learning when to say, you know what? Okay, we're going to capitalize department when it's by itself. That's fine. We can capitalize department or administration, which I gave up on.
And that could be through a volunteer activity.
Yep.
And, find one that's comfortable to you. Like if you swim, if there's a swim group that needs some help with something that doesn't feel like it's going to wade into something that might make you seem less neutral. I think continuing to find ways to practice these skills, even during everything that's happening, is critical. Yeah. We have a minute left, and I'm just going to give you the last word just by asking the lazy but brilliant journalist question, which is there anything that I should have asked you that I didn't?
And as a communicator, I would tell you to say, nope, I said everything, or to circle back to the 3 things you wrote down before your interview.
Totally. Exactly. All the secrets now.
No. All right. So the 3 things I wrote down before this that I wanted to make sure you guys heard were follow your heart. Don't feel like you need to have a master plan. Just go to the job that calls to you. And it may not work out, and that's okay. Keep going. Take baby steps with dip your toe in the water of putting yourself out there. on social media if you're not comfortable with it. I have never not been comfortable with talking about myself and the world and my opinions since I left the newsroom. But like, just dip your toe in it a little bit and just know that there are a bunch of people out there in the world who are former journalists. I know more former journalists than current journalists right now, I would say. When I think, oh, I need to talk to a former journalist about a thing, I can think of hundreds of people. And so we are all out here waiting to help you and guide you and be helpful to you. Hi, Callista.
All right, that's my cue. Wait, is there a third one?
No, there's
Okay.
two things.
Okay. Oh, follow your heart, take baby steps, and then go
There's
out.
a bunch of us here out. We're all here for you guys.
We're all here for you.
Viola is an amazing, amazing Sherpa. She will help you and guide you the way you need to be guided.
Thank you. Thank you. I will accept that and honor it and say, yes, I believe that.
And if you have questions for, like, if you need me, I'm on social media on all the platforms, but I'm also Dorie at DorieTurnerNolt.com.
Look at that, Dorie at DorieTurnerNolt.com. And I'm so afraid of your name because I think I'm going to forget the E. I keep wanting in my head to call you Holt and not Nolt. Dorie at.
Be the first.
Oh my goodness. So, okay, we are at time. Thank you so much, Dorie Turner Nolt. Thank you, everyone. Next week, if you'll be here, I will do again my live resume review. So sign up and I will see you then. All right,
Bye,
take
guys.
care. Bye.
Hey, Mama. Hey, Mommy.